The parking garage on 5th and Madison had seen better days. It was the kind of place where the fluorescent lights flickered just enough to make you nervous but not enough to justify a complaint. The concrete pillars were painted yellow and white like some forgotten attempt at cheerfulness, and the whole structure smelled of motor oil and old rain. It was Tuesday evening around 7:30. Most of the downtown office workers had already gone home. The garage was quiet, the kind of quiet that older folks recognize immediately, the kind that tells you something is about to happen. Marcus Webb was 43 years old. He was the kind of man you might overlook at first glance. He wore a simple dark red t-shirt and dark shorts. His arms were thick and honest arms, built not from a gym membership but from years of real work, years of lifting and hauling and doing what needed to be done without anyone asking him twice. He had a calm face, a face that had weathered things, the kind of face that people in their 50s and 60s recognize instantly because they have seen it in the mirror. He was a single father. Had been for 7 years now. His daughter Emma was 9 years old. She had her mother's eyes and her grandfather's stubbornness, and Marcus loved her more than anything this world had ever offered him. She was wearing her school clothes, still a white blouse and a dark skirt, because she had come straight from her after-school program. They were walking to their car, a simple, sensible sedan parked near the back wall. Emma was holding his hand. That was the part Marcus would remember most later, not the confrontation, not the fear, not even the outcome. He would remember that small warm hand in his, and how everything he did that evening came from that single point of contact. They had just turned the corner near the central ramp when they heard it. Voices. Sharp ones. 3 men in dark business suits had a woman backed against the hood of a large black BMW. The car's headlights were on, casting everything in a pale dramatic glow. The woman was blonde, professional looking. She was wearing a white blouse tucked into a pencil skirt, and she was clearly frightened. Her name, as Marcus would later learn, was Catherine Hale, and she was 41 years old, and she was the chief executive officer of Hale Meridian Group, a mid-sized logistics company that had been making uncomfortable waves in certain circles. The 3 men were not random criminals. They were hired. The first man was stocky, with short dark hair and a face that had clearly been broken at least once. He was the one with his hands on Catherine's shoulders, pushing her back against the hood. The second man stood just behind, laughing in a way that made Marcus's stomach turn, a laugh that had no joy in it, only cruelty. The third man was taller, leaner. He stood to the side, watching the ramp, watching the entrance. He was the lookout. Marcus stopped walking. He felt Emma's hand tighten around his fingers. He looked down at her. She was looking at the scene with wide eyes, not crying, not screaming, just watching, the way children sometimes do when they're trying to understand something that doesn't make sense to them yet. Marcus crouched down quietly beside her. He said, "Emma, I need you to do something for me right now." She looked at him. He said, "You remember that pillar we passed, the yellow one with the exit sign above it?" She nodded. He said, "I need you to walk back to that pillar calmly, and I need you to stand behind it, and I need you to not come out until I call your name. Do you understand me?" Emma was 9, but she was not a foolish 9. She had grown up watching her father handle hard things with a steady hand. She trusted him the way children trust parents who have never given them reason not to. She said, "Okay, Daddy." And she walked back. Calmly. No running, no panic. Marcus watched her until she disappeared behind the pillar. Then he stood up and he turned back toward the BMW. Now here is something important to understand about Marcus Webb. He had grown up in a neighborhood where trouble found you whether you wanted it or not. He had learned early that the men who survived those streets were not always the biggest or the loudest. They were the ones who stayed calm, the ones who could read a room and a situation and 3 strangers in an empty garage in about 4 seconds flat. He took a breath. And he walked forward. His footsteps were quiet but not sneaky. He wanted them to hear him. He wanted the lookout to see him first, because if the lookout panicked, that changed everything. The tall, lean man turned. He sized Marcus up fast, practiced the way someone does when they have done this kind of work before. He looked at Marcus's arms and his face, and then he made a mistake. He underestimated him. The tall man said, "Keep walking, friend. Nothing here concerns you." Marcus stopped about 10 feet away from the BMW. He said, "I hear you." He said it slowly and evenly, the way you talk to someone when you want them to know you are not afraid, "but I am going to need you to let that woman step away from your car." The stocky man with his hands on Catherine's shoulders turned his head. He had small eyes and a wide jaw, and he looked at Marcus the way a dog looks at a stranger, too long, too still. He said, "Walk away." Marcus said, "I will not." There was a pause. That pause was important. It was the kind of pause that happens in a situation when neither side is sure yet what the other side is made of. In that pause, Marcus counted 3 things quickly. He counted the distance between himself and the stocky man. He counted the position of the second man, who was still laughing but had stopped laughing now. He counted the space between the BMW and the concrete pillar to his left. He also noticed something else. Catherine Hale was looking at him. Not with panic, not with tears, she was looking at him with the focused measuring gaze of someone who runs a company, someone who has sat in boardrooms where decisions meant millions of dollars, and she was reading the situation the same way he was. She gave him the smallest possible nod. It said, "I am ready." The stockman pushed away from Catherine and walked toward Marcus. And here is where the story could have become a different kind of story, a violent kind, a dark kind, but Marcus Webb had a daughter standing behind a yellow pillar 30 feet away, and he had not raised her to see that kind of story. So when the stockman got close enough, Marcus did something unexpected. He spoke. Not loudly, not aggressively. He said, "I know what you were hired to do. I know who Catherine Hale is. I know that someone is pressuring her company, and I know that whatever you were paid tonight is not worth what comes next." The stockman stopped. The second man stopped laughing entirely. Even the tall, lean lookout took one step closer, wanting to hear. Marcus continued. He said, "There is a child in this garage, my daughter. She has already seen your faces. In about 4 minutes she is going to call 911 because that is what I told her to do if I was not back by then." This was a lie. Emma did not have a phone. But Marcus said it with the same calm voice he used when he read Emma bedtime stories, the same voice that did not waver. He said, "So here is how tonight ends. You walk away, Catherine drives away, and in the morning everyone wakes up and makes different choices." The stockman stared at him. Long and hard. And then something shifted. It was subtle, the way weather shifts before rain, not dramatic, just a change in pressure, a change in the quality of the air. The second man, the one who had been laughing, put his hands in his suit pockets. The tall, lean one looked toward the ramp. The stockman said in a low voice, "You have no idea what you just stepped into." Marcus said, "Maybe not, but I'm still standing here." Another pause. Catherine had moved slowly, carefully away from the hood of the BMW. She was standing now 3 feet further from the car. Her keys were in her hand. And then, just like that, the 3 men walked away. Not running, not angry, deliberately, professionally, the way men walk when they have made a business calculation and the math no longer works in their favor. They went up the ramp and the sound of their footsteps faded and the garage became quiet again. Catherine Hale stood by her BMW. She looked at Marcus. She said, "Who are you?" Marcus said, "Nobody important." She said, "You could have walked past." He said, "I have a daughter." She seemed to understand exactly what that meant. She said, "Thank you," and it was 2 words, but she said them like she meant every letter of every syllable, like she had pulled them up from somewhere real. Marcus nodded. He turned and walked back toward the yellow pillar. Emma came out before he even called her name because she had been watching through the gap between the pillar and the wall the entire time. She ran to him and he crouched down and caught her and held her. She said against his shoulder, "You were so calm, Daddy." He said, "I was not calm on the inside." She pulled back and looked at his face. She said, "Really?" He said, "Really, but sometimes you just do the thing anyway." She thought about this. She said, "Like when I had to do my math presentation even though I was scared." He laughed. He actually laughed there in that flickering parking garage, and it was a real laugh, a warm one. He said, "Exactly like that." They walked to their car. Before they drove away, Marcus saw the black BMW pull out slowly from the other side of the structure. Catherine Hale driving. She passed them and she stopped for just a moment alongside Marcus's window. She rolled hers down. She said, "I am going to remember tonight." Marcus said, "Drive safe." She smiled and then she drove away into the evening. Now here is the part of this story that matters most. 3 weeks later, Marcus received a letter. It was formal and it was on company letterhead, and it said that Hale Meridian Group was expanding its operations management team and that his name had been referred by the CEO herself for a senior logistics coordinator position. The salary was listed, the benefits were listed, and at the bottom of the letter in handwriting, not typeface, were 4 words. "For doing the thing anyway." Marcus sat at his kitchen table that evening after Emma had gone to sleep. He held that letter for a long time. He was 43 years old. He had been working the same warehouse route for 11 years. He had done it without complaint because it kept the lights on and the refrigerator full and Emma in good shoes. But there had been a version of himself from a long time ago who had wanted more, a version that life and loss and the weight of single parenthood had slowly, quietly set aside. He looked around his kitchen. At Emma's artwork on the refrigerator. At the photograph on the counter of himself and Emma at the beach last summer. She was laughing in the photograph, her head thrown back the way his own mother used to laugh. He picked up a pen. And he wrote back. Now if you have reached this moment in the story and something in your chest feels a little lighter, a little fuller, you are not alone. Because the real story here is not about 3 men in a parking garage. It is not even about a CEO or a job offer or a man with strong arms in a red shirt. The real story is about what we do when we could walk past. When walking past would be easier, safer, more sensible. Most of us have had a moment like Marcus's moment. Maybe not in a parking garage, maybe in an office when someone was being treated unfairly, maybe at a family dinner when someone said something they should not have and the whole table went quiet and everyone looked at their plates. Maybe in a doctor's waiting room when a stranger was crying and nobody else moved. In those moments we make a choice. And the choice almost always costs us something small. A little comfort, a little safety, a little of that smooth, easy road. But what it gives back. What it gives back tends to arrive later and arrives in ways we did not plan for. Marcus Webb did not walk into that garage looking for opportunity. He walked into it holding his daughter's hand. And that is the truest thing this story has to offer you today. Life does not always reward the brave in the moment. Sometimes the reward comes 3 weeks later in a letter. Sometimes it comes 30 years later in the eyes of a child who grew up watching you and learned without a single lesson ever being taught that decent people do the thing anyway. Emma Webb is 9 years old. Someday she will be 43. And she will have her own parking garage moment. And she will be standing there in some version of that flickering light. And she will remember. Not a superhero. Not someone without fear. Just her father. Crouching down beside her saying, I need you to walk to that pillar and I will call you when it is safe. And how he actually called. How he always called. That is the inheritance that matters. Not the job, not the letter, not the 3 men who walked away. The inheritance is the example. It is the quiet, steady proof passed from one generation to the next that ordinary people in ordinary moments can do extraordinary things. And they do not even have to announce it. They just have to show up. If this story sat with you today, if it reminded you of someone you love or someone you used to be or someone you are still trying to become, please take just a moment and give this a like. It tells us that these kinds of stories matter to you and it helps us reach other people who might need to hear something gentle and true today. Share this with someone in your life who always does the right thing even when it costs them something, someone who shows up, someone who calls. Leave a comment below and tell us about a moment when you or someone you know chose to stop and help when the easy choice would have been to keep walking. Those real stories from real lives are the most powerful ones of all. And if you have not yet subscribed, please do. Because we are going to keep telling stories like this one, stories about real people in real moments making choices that matter, stories warm enough to carry you through the day. Thank you for listening. Drive safe out there. And hold on to the ones you love.